I'm Adam. I'm talking to Ian Astbury from The Cult. Now, a couple of years ago, you said that there will be no more full-length Cult studio albums.
Yes.
What changed your mind?
Good question. Good first question.
Thank
I love it. I have to go straight to Kung Fu right
Okay,
there.
I
It's
was
like
nervous. I'm feeling
deflect.
better
No,
now.
I have to kind of get straight into it. The bare bones of it was we went through a rough. We're born into this. The record was made in 15 days. Songs weren't fully realized. It was a bad marriage with the label. It was a tough time. It was a really challenging time, and also what was happening in the music industry. We've seen more people give away music, devaluation of music, the cannibalization of albums in various digital download sites, and just felt that the album context, the idea of sitting down and listening to an album, people's attention spans were shorter, and it's kind of feeling that the album kind of the format belonged in the late 20th century. And the idea was to create a format that belonged in the 21st century. So I kind of came up with the idea of a capsule, of releasing new music every 3 months, 2 new songs. I had this whole idea of like subscription service, the whole idea of like, some kind of commission from the audience, like telling us what kind of song. I had different ways of spinning it out, but essentially getting away from the album, the constriction of an album. Anyway, so we went in with Chris Goss and we started making these capsule recordings. And by the time we got to capsule 2, we'd done 2 cycles of this. We found that all of a sudden we've now taken on de facto, we're now with the label. So we're involved in all the machinations of a label, the marketing, all of that. And then also we had the thing with our audience are hearing these songs in the capsule, Every Man and Woman's a Star, Siberia, Embers, Till the Light Takes Us, and they're going, this is incredible, we want more, give us an album. Like, I'm the holdout, I'm like, nuh-uh, we're staying with this. Meanwhile, my manager, Billy, they're saying, we're kind of getting a lot of heat for an album. And then labels banging on the door, we want to sign the band, we love the material you're working on, we think there's an album here. And I'm going, what about the capsules? They're like, yeah, that's great, but we want to make an album. So everyone's looking at me, and I was like the holdout, and I held out to the very, very end, and I just capitulated. I was like, okay, fine. But then as we kind of got into the idea of an album again, it was interesting. Working with Chris, we'd already started the capsules, so it was kind of seamless. It's kind of working in the same space.
Just making more.
Yeah,
songs,
just making
right?
more, precisely. But then you're kind of in this idea of, you try and encapsulate a period, a time. And in many ways, this record has more continuity, connectedness than maybe Born Into This, which was, fragmented in many ways.
One interesting thing about The Cult that you just made me think of is there are fans who love every song you've ever done.
Yes.
But people think of the Love era and the Electric era and
Yeah.
Sonic Temple. Just everyone has their, not necessarily favorite, but each
Yeah.
album does seem to go together, really.
Absolutely.
And with the new one, I mean, how I would describe the new one, which is called Choice of Weapon, for those that don't know, is it has a raw, street, almost kind of punky sort of quality, but it also has that grand cinematic element and some mysticism, as I perceive it, as well. Slash spirituality.
Cool. Good.
I was wondering, could you
said it
describe
all.
it in a shorter way?
No.
And
You've described it perfectly.
Oh, you think that covers it?
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That kind of really encapsulates what it is. And that's the kind of levels that we work on. I mean, some of this record was straight off New York City sidewalk. It really was. I was living in New York when a lot of this record was conceived. But then again, I was also in, I'm relating to the Himalayas. I'm relating to Tibet. I'm relating to wilderness regions, California desert. And then, hotel rooms around the world, from Paris to Tokyo to Munich to Toronto to wherever. And it's a life lived on many different levels. But I was really trying to get to the molecules of experiences, observations, how I felt. Like there's a song in there called Honey from a Knife.
Yes.
And it was reflecting upon a very frenetic period experience I was going through, kind of moment of self-doubt, like a Dante's Inferno, and really feeling like had no place, not only as an individual, but also as an artist. Although I felt very connected to a certain aspect of the culture. In fact, I was more ingrained in sort of postmodern street culture and fine art in that area than maybe more. My musical voice was more in things like Uncle and Boris, and it's more in that area. So that's maybe why Born Into This sounded like that in that way. But this record, talking about like Honey from a Knife, talking about like running down Lafayette Street in New York with my arm cut open from a knife wound, and that's true. That happened. There was an experience. I'm documenting an actual moment of a self-inflicted knife wound, and kind of the madness, the place I was in, and I was really searching for some kind of real feeling, some real edge, and that comes across on the record, I think.
I think so. I mean, what's interesting is I'm not surprised to hear you say that's at least part of what the song's about, but I never would have guessed it. Really.
Well, it's part about that, but it's also there's some redemptive, moving through, kind of challenges, obstacles, dark night of the soul, and okay. It's really interesting. Some artists trying to keep this veneer of youth and virility, spontaneity. The idea of you come out there and you're flawless as a performer.
Yeah.
Your skin's perfect, your teeth are perfect, your hair's perfect, your clothes are perfect, the songs are pristine, it's very professional. That's not the kind of animal that the cult is, and I'm certainly not that guy. Let it all hang out. I mean, I'm showing it for what it is. I don't color my hair. I got some gray in there, but I got some scars, got a few knocks, but that's reflected in the music as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's you. There's no experience isn't something to hide. I don't think that makes artists what they are, really.
I think the closer you can get to your truth, and you reflect that, and you can hang it, and you can be in that space, and you can stay there, you can hold that space, and you can kind of capture that. I think you're, really reflecting a true moment, true life.
Makes sense. And, it's occurred to me that one thing I love about Choice of Weapon, the music on it, is it does all the things we've described. Yet it sounds like once the songs were written, you just laid them down. You didn't use any overdubs or studio trickery. They sound both raw and also pure. Like, these are the songs.
Yeah, very much so.
Really.
There was no real studio. I mean, there's certainly no vocal, pitching or, there's none of that. I did do, actually at school, when I was in Canada, I studied music theory for one semester. I was playing the tenor saxophone, and I picked that because I know David Bowie played saxophone. So,
well, you're doing pretty well with whatever theory you have.
It's more intuitive, and I can play a bit of guitar. I'm like a one-finger piano player. I usually like to label the keys like 1, 2, 3, 4, or use different color tape for the melodies. But I got better at it, so I can play melodies on piano and come up with. I really like using the piano for melodies. Actually my favorite instrument's the bass. I love plugging a dirty, distorted bass.
Really?
Especially if it's like an old P bass or. I mean, I adore Peter Hook. I think Peter Hook's incredible, and I always try and emulate. I pretend when I'm playing bass on Peter Hook. My other favorite bass player is probably Roger Waters, who I think's stunning bass player.
Definitely.
Especially like Echoes, Live at Pompeii.
Sure.
They're laying down a fat groove on that.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
It seems like it took a lot of time to get a particular sort of sound.
What's that?
Pink Floyd, I mean. Sorry, should I?
Oh, to get the sound, Pink Floyd?
To get this specific
They really worked at it.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, they evolved. I mean, consider what they were like in the 60s with Syd Barrett, and then...
Oh, sure, yeah.
My God.
I mean, a good example of both a studio band and a live band in very different
It's
respects.
interesting, I mean, like a band like Pink Floyd, that people now, like younger musicians, would probably reference Pink Floyd circa 1969, 1970 through 1972 versus the Sex Pistols or punk rock. It's like somehow Pink Floyd seems to be more befitting of a modernist kind of, influence than the Pistols or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting how it happened. I think that's a big difference from the 90s, going from more of a a lot of bands go for sort of cinematic sounds.
Yeah.
I
There was
think
a lot
I
of
would
very
say.
cinematic bands in the 90s. You're absolutely right. I mean, you have bands like Spiritualized and
Oh, sure, it was still kicking, actually. Yeah.
who are back.
Yeah.
Certainly Uncle, I mean, that kind of progressive electronic driven was more like soundtracks to films, that weren't made. Sigaros.
Yeah, Mogwai.
Mogwai, oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I love Mogwai. I love the soundtrack they did to the Zidane movie,
I don't know.
21st Century Portrait. It's genius.
I'll look that up.
They're
for
incredible
sure.
live. Mogwai, incredible.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be a challenge replicating the kind of stuff they do on record.
You couldn't.
Yep.
Oh, well, no, we couldn't.
Oh.
We couldn't, the audience, but I think they possibly could.